Jesus, Mary, and Joseph try for a Christmas orgasm by David McGrath. When the kids were younger, Joseph always turned off the television on a sex scene. The family would then sit in the silence of the sex that wasn't. And when enough stifling awkwardness had passed, the youngest kid, having guessed an adequate length of time for the sex to finish, would ask his dad, was it okay to turn back on the film? And Joseph would himself guess if an adequate length of time had passed, and maybe say okay, and maybe turn back on the telly. Or maybe say no, that there was plenty of time for watching them dirty old films when you were older, that it was bedtime. So Joseph sits with the whole world about to swallow him up. He's mortified. Sex is not within 40 miles of Joseph's type of conversation. And to sit talking about the female orgasm, Kentucky Fried Christ. He reaches for some hope. It's like, you've never even, no, says Mary. I thought, no. I'm sorry, Mary. I always just thought, I know. 30 years of marriage. I love you, Joe. That was always there, and always will be there. So what now? Because I meant cookbooks, or vouchers, jewelry maybe. I'd like to see a sex therapist. I'd like you to come with me to see a sex therapist. It's far from feckin' sex therapy I was reared, Joseph says. And it's true, it's far from feckin' sex therapy Joseph was reared. Joseph is from a long line of men who don't go to the doctor unless they're dead. Men forged in the west of Ireland gales, men whose stagnant stares would cut you in half, men who sat in the pub with their brothers for their whole lives, all to see who'd inherit the farm. And if the reading of the will went well, then they'd get courting, and then married, and then maybe, you know. Mary's father had said they could marry if Joseph spent his entire life being of service to her and forgave her for everything. Otherwise he had no business taking on marriage, and Joseph had agreed. Okay, Mary, okay, in sickness and in health, you know, whatever it takes. But this sex therapist, not some Protestant. So Joseph, on Christmas week, sits in this sex therapist's office, photographs of clitorises all around, with tinsel strung to their picture frames for a festive feel. And this Spanish Catholic sex therapist named Jesús smiles at him. Why don't you tell me about your marriage, Joseph? It's good. It's great, in fact. 3 children, all very successful, all happy as far as we can tell. No grandchildren yet, but please God, in time. All the marriages we know have fallen by the wayside. They've got the kids out the door, then went their separate ways with the secret Facebook love interests. Sick to the feckin' teeth of one another, but not us. And the sex? Ah, for fuck's sake. I'm sorry, for a 55-year-old Irish Catholic man, son of 6th-generation sheep farmer, you know. There must have been sex on the farm. Ah, fuck's sake. With the sheep, I mean. Ah, fuck's sake. Joe, Mary says, calm down. Joseph, it's okay. Mary and I have been going over a few things, and she's overheating during foreplay. Overheating? Her body is spending an inordinate amount of time, energy, cooling itself down. It doesn't have capacity to orgasm as a result. Joseph is relieved beyond words that it's Mary's fault. Nothing to do with him or his kissing or his inexperience or his libido or his penis or his erection or his existential despair or the midlife crisis set at low vibration in his noggin. None of that. Buy a fan, says Jesus.
Place it beside your bed when about to have sex.
A fan, Roger that, a fan. The best feckin' fan in the shop. Joseph leaves the office and sex therapy is not too bad. On Christmas Eve, Joseph hands this fan across the sitting room, and the fan is wrapped up in Rudolph wrapping paper with a massive red bow on top. Happy early Christmas, he says to Mary with a wink. The kids don't have a clue what's going on, but Joseph and Mary are smiling like teenagers. You're getting weird, Dad. And when the kids leave, Mary and Joseph hop, skip and jump upstairs with the fan. Feckin' thing, Joseph says when it won't turn on. The feckin' thing! The cheap piece of feckin'! Calm down, Joe, Mary says. But Joseph is in a fluster. Mary, you wanted an orgasm for Christmas, and an orgasm for Christmas is what you're getting. We need to cool you down some other way. We could fuck in the fridge. Ah, with that language, Mary! What do you think of calling Jesus? Call him? Call him for what? What we're paying him for help. He could come over. The sex therapist doesn't come over, Joe. Mary, you told me something this month that near cut me in half. A whole life of sexual a feckin' half-life I woke up to find I was living. And I'm cards on the table here, Mary. I haven't felt like a man since. I need to give you this orgasm. I need to give you this orgasm or it's going to feckin' kill me. Mary feels responsible. She feels the man at his wit's end in front of her is her fault. She feels herself almost say yes. Then she retracts. Then she goes again. Call him. Joseph calls the sex therapist. Jesus! Can you come over? Jesus, the sex therapist, comes over on Christmas Eve with a red velvet Santa sack. Is there a fan in that sack? Joseph asks. Let's go upstairs. The trio go up to their bedroom. Jesus empties out the sack onto the bedroom floor. Vibrators and blindfolds, plugs and poppers, gags and wraparound dildos, latex and batteries, and long string of beads that reminds poor Joseph of his late grandma's rosary. Honey lube leaking from its tube and coating everything. A filthy, sticky mush of sin. You're a dirty fecker, Jesus. Joseph says as he inspects the hall. We need none of these, Jesus says. We need just these. He holds the sack itself up and a blindfold close to Joseph's face. I will stand at the side of the bed wearing the blindfold, of course, and I will flap the sack. Flap the sack. To cool Mary down, I will be the fan. Jesus puts the blindfold on and starts to flap the sack like his life depends on it. There's not much left to do. Joseph undresses and joins Mary on the bed. He starts to do the thing he thinks she likes but doesn't actually like at all. And nothing has changed. Are you cool? Joseph asks. Not really, Mary says, mushed and smushed beneath him, and nothing is different, but he's made so much of an effort that Mary fakes a moan. What was that? Joseph asked. What was what? That was a fake moan, Mary. You're doing a great job. A great job? Is everything okay? Asks Jesus. Everything's grand, Jesus, Joseph says. Keep flapping there, good man. Jesus keeps flapping and Joseph gives something else a go. Things get worse. Joseph and Mary become forlorn. Ah, would you flap it for feck's sake, Jesus? Joseph says and hops up naked from the bed. Flap it, he says. Flap it for feck's sake, like this. Joseph snatches the sack from Jesus and begins to furiously flap it with all the anger and sexual frustration and nervous breakdown pent up inside him. Jesus has slipped up the blindfold to watch the required fury of flappage Joseph thinks necessary. He sees Mary on the bed. Then all three realize Jesus has seen Mary in the nip. And there's an intimacy, a damage is done sort of thing, a sort of what's the harm now anyway? And Joseph looks at Mary, and Mary looks at Joseph, and there's an understanding. Jesus, Joseph says, do you think Mary is attractive? Yes, Jesus says, of course. I'll flap the sack. Keep Mary company on the bed. Mary, are you okay with that? Yes, Mary says. And so Jesus, the sex therapist, not needing to be told twice, joins Mary on the bed. And Joseph gets furiously flapping the sack with ferocious amounts of pent-up sexual frustration. And Jesus, the sex therapist, starts to lay down some moves. He touches Mary's body, and she's electrified. He's opening up erogenous zones that have never before been explored, and Mary, for the first time in her life, is tingling something different. She's bursting, and the suction, and she's barely hanging on beneath his mouth. And Jesus, the sex therapist, is in, pumping hard, shaking and baking, and Mary releases and screams, and Jesus only pumps harder, grabbing her hair and her arse, and Mary feels like she's got hands on her everything, and Joseph is furiously flapping the sack next to the bed, so hard that Jesus's flowing locks flutter in its dripping breeze, and Jesus grabs Mary's mouth and holds it close to his face, pinches its cheeks to him, and Mary can feel his breath and thinks she's blacking out, and he's a gun-slinging fuckshake firing on all fuck cylinders. And Mary knows her life will never be the same after this. There's backpacking in Brazil to be done now. There's a new and wondrous outlook, adventure, curiosity, tattoos and orgies, drugs maybe, fuck it after this fuck. And she can barely breathe for the elation. This is the ride of her life. And she's pretty certain she's levitating because she feels only air beneath her. And where once she was only pretending, Mary feels herself believing in love now. And God is here. Maybe she's dead, but God's saying, now is not your time, child. Go back and earn every moment. Mary now believes in reincarnation through the collective unconsciousness of beauty, life, and gorging pleasure. Mary is realizing there never was a casting out of the Garden of Eden. Heaven was here all along. Paradise is right now. Mary's whole psychic outlook changes as she comes. It's like she's being fucked by the book of Revelation, and there's fingers in her mouth, and Jesus pinches his own nipples and drinks her in as he comes hard himself. Trabajando duro para papi. And the language out of him brings Mary to another climax. She's a writhing, gasping, lost all control mess that's never going to be the same. All things now coming either before or after this Jesus, the sex therapist fuck of all fucks. All things now coming, Santa coming, eternal bliss coming, sunshine coming in the slippery blue sex moonlight, and the sex stops but the pleasure charges onwards in electrocuting tingles, and Jesus and Mary lie in each other's sweaty embrace for the longest time, like a couple of strung out sex junkies, caressing themselves with hot placed kisses on the other's spent and naked body, and gasp. And Joseph, beside them, flaps and flaps and flaps. Jesus returns to the third dimension first and sits up on the side of the bed to hazily search for his underpants. And he finds them and stands up to put them on. And as Mary rebirths on the bed, trying to remember her own name and what year it is, Joseph comes to Jesus' side as he's pulling on his shirt, and Joseph grabs his shoulder and pulls Jesus in close. And Joseph looks in the eyes of the man who's just pleasured his wife to within an inch of her life and says, "Now, Jesus, that's how you flap a feckin' sack, you."